Good, everyone. You're all very welcome to Thursday's live US session open. Of course, today we do have ECB market reaction, which we're going to go through shortly. So really all eyes on the price action today, as we know, given the volatility yesterday, given the contagion we've kind of talked about all week, and of course, some of those geopolitical risks as well. So I suppose firstly and foremost, just there in the last 5 minutes or so, we've had ECB interest rates updated by the ECB, going from 2.5% to 3% in the deposit facility and 3 to 3.5% in the main refinancing operation. So, of course, sticking to the mandate, aggressive increasing in interest rates by the ECB continues despite some of the negativity, some of obviously the European issues with the likes of Deutsche Bank and Credit Suisse, and of course the contagion in the US markets as well. So ECB still proving to be very, very hawkish. Now, of course, we will look at the market reaction now in a second in some of these major assets. Now, of course, again, in 24 minutes time, we will have the Lagarde press conference just after the open. So 15 minutes before the open, we've the data release, and then of course 15 minutes after the open at 1:45 today we have Lagarde speaking as well, press conference. So it's going to be a very, very volatile hour into the open, obviously at 1:30, but also into 2 o'clock as we gauge kind of where the ECB is, and of course depending on then, do we see risk aversion in the markets creeping in again, or do we see actually a little bit of buoyancy in the markets? Now, I suppose firstly, if we're looking at the markets broadly since 3:15, we have had a little bit of a spike on the data, but since then euro dollar has been pared back to the downside. Similarly with gold, we had an initial sell-off, but we're back into session highs. Now, I suppose with gold, it's important to be relative of the fact that really since about 8 o'clock this morning, we've seen gold continue to rally again from these mid-teens, 1915s, all the way up into 1930s, where we're currently at it today at 1932. So gold still keeping that hedge very much intact. And of course, with the stronger dollar, obviously with the stronger gold as well, in some of the FX pairs, with the euro dollar, we're seeing indices pair back as well to where we had yesterday's market profile range. So I suppose in the initial offsets in the first kind of 5 minutes, 7 minutes after the data, very much risk orientated off the table. We're seeing oil even sell off as well. Fairly decent sell-offs continuing in oil today as we now trade just above $66 a barrel. And of course, meanwhile, in the other major European and US indices as well, DAX has seen some volatility today, and of course is continuing to move lower, fairly evenly spotted in the last, as I said, last 5-10 minutes or so, as we've gone from 14,800 all the way down to 14,650. So there's been a 150 point sell-off, which equates to approximately a 1% dip in the DAX. So indices are off as we speak into the US Open. Of course, will that continue as Lagarde speaks at 1:45? Well, obviously time will tell. And as I said as well, with the gold hedge obviously continue to play to the upside, as gold markets, broadly speaking, still very much holding their bid following those kind of very significant rallies from the 1800s mid last week. So I suppose now let's look at the economic calendar. Okay, so as we said, we've got Lagarde up in just over 22 minutes. So we'll have the press conference, we'll have the policy statement, we'll then have the Q&A afterwards. So that'll probably bring us up into around about 2 o'clock, 2:30. And then obviously then realizing the volatility in the price action through the course of the afternoon as we kind of migrate into European close and just into the remainder of the US trading session. So as I said, risk elevated, very much present. Euro dollar initially, as I said, even continued to sell off. So where we were a moment ago, 105.75s, we're now in a further 20 points lower as we're seeing risk aversion coming through. And of course, simultaneously as well, if we look at it, the DXY risk orientation, segmentation into risk out of riskier asset classes into safer havens has seen the DXY pick up steam. So even despite the bullish bias in gold, we are seeing obviously dollar strength remain very much intact in these markets as well. So indices are off, dollar stronger, gold has been hedged, and of course any of the risk assets. So I suspect probably the cryptos in line with the movements in the indices will probably take a hit through the course of the afternoon as well. But of course, let's see how does that become reciprocated, as I said, as Lagarde steps onto the stage as in just over 20 minutes time. So I suppose that then brings us to, I suppose, some of the other data prints today. So I think all eyes was really on Lagarde today. and the ECB broadly speaking, given that building permits, a lot of the US data hasn't actually been that bad. Housing starts is up. Housing changes in building is up. Building permits is up. So construction broadly in the US was pretty good. Jobless numbers, again, claims this week coming in at a modest 192,000. So overall weekly claims is also on the up. I suppose the only difference is there that the Philly Manufacturing Fed survey was under expectation at -23 rather than -14. But broadly, a lot of the US data actually holding quite well into the ECB. But of course, the big talking point today was going to be ECB. And as a direct result, we are seeing that initial sell-off into the open. Now, of course, a lot can change. I suppose that first 15 minutes into 130, worth paying very, very close attention because, of course, Thursdays, anything can generally happen. We've often seen many occasions where we're 200-300 points up and we finish the day lower. We're trading moderately lower in the indices. So we could very easily see a curtailing in bearishness and actually see markets actually recover into the afternoon. So watching the price action and being very nimble with what is happening in the markets is ultimately very, very, very important as well. Now, I suppose with that aside, looking at market profiles now. So I suppose first things first, bringing the market profiles into play from yesterday, as we talked about initially into yesterday's open within our community group, we're focused on that sell-off into obviously the open and determining could the price action rally back into this 3,900, 39.20 level to where we had the pre-existing market profiles into yesterday, our point of control into yesterday's open. And of course, we actually did grind higher back into that rested level where we kind of closed overnight at 3,900s, where we had that fulcrum bell-shaped curve today. Now, of course, we are seeing initial swipes lower into 230. So obviously the C prints is at 130, D prints will be at 230. So really just seeing how does the market react, because of course, yesterday we had a lot of volatility here between 38.45 and 38.65. You can kind of see this bell-shaped curve into yesterday's open down here. And I think that's going to be an important level for, if we are to see selling continue, you would really be looking for this area down here to be taken out and to allow for a deeper sell-off through the course of the afternoon. But as we speak at the minute, S&P 500, if we look at the broader markets, we are coming back into that area yesterday we're kind of seeing here visibly, and we are holding above it as we speak into the open. So of course it'll be interesting to see does that sell-off become a little bit more aggregated and aggressive into obviously the Lagarde press conference, and of course seeing does the price action actually take out the structural price action from here as well. So worth keeping a very, very close eye on that. Now when we look at market profiles for the day, of course market profiles has been very much set, point of control around that 3,900, 39.05, 10 levels. So worth keeping an eye on that to see if there's buying coming back in. Most likely it's going to allow for a 40, 50 point increase back up into the point of control where we've pretty much contained most of this morning's price action. And of course, you can see that there very, very quickly, a lot of price action up until about 8 o'clock this morning, 7:30 this morning before we started to drift lower into the ECB. This is kind of where a lot of the price action has been contained about. Now, of course, as we said, euro dollar is an interesting one today. Obviously, very, very clear selling, but again, starting to see some volatility. Wicks price action back and forth. Algo's arbitrage between the buying and the selling very much visible. And we're nearly back to where we were. Okay, so we had that initial spike at 115. We've obviously broken to new lows on the session. We are now coming back up into this value area as well, around 106. So worth keeping an eye out to see how does the market react, because of course, if we were to take out 106, 106.20, then you're really potentially looking for a recovery through the course of the afternoon and that shift in sentiment again. So keeping an eye on the price action is ultimately very important, but also keeping an eye on the sentiment within the index and the physical price action that's taking hold on the markets, broadly speaking, on these different asset classes. Now, of course, looking at the other indices as well, Dow Jones is very much off again. So kind of similar to the S&P story, ground higher into the close yesterday between 31,900, 32,000 we talked about. We've actually seen that drift lower again back into the 600s. And of course, we're pulling back into where we had yesterday's point of control. So of course, if we move across to the USA 30, now, of course, we will be watching the price action today at the US Open very, very closely, given to see if there's any selling coming through. And as we said yesterday, rallying from 600s all the way back up into this 32,000, 31,950 level where we formed POCs today. And of course, market bearish price action coming back in again all the way back into yesterday's POC. So 600s should be a very, very interesting level on Dow Jones as well. So keep an eye on that through that first 30 minutes of the US Open, but also through the Lagarde Open, because of course, Lagarde press conference, should I say, in case there is a leveling out and selling, and in terms of seeing does the buying come back into the markets as well. And of course, you can see that there very, very vividly. We are still hedging or heading down into that level. So interesting to see if there is any sort of reaction from this region down here today to allow a pullback into obviously the value ranges, which is, as I said, on Dow Jones, around about 31,950. Now, of course, on the open, we're just coming into the open now as well. Obviously, that selling seems to be eroding a little bit. S&P's is coming back in. Dow Jones is coming back in. If we have a quick look at the NASDAQ as well, from where we were obviously yesterday, very, very clear run up into last night's close, obviously at 12,300s. We're off again in the NASDAQ as well. So all three US indices, pretty much identical viewpoints. If we look at market profiles as well on the NAS, very, very, very quickly, you will see, as I said, clear buying from the 12,100s all the way back up into this 400 level, 350 level. And of course, we've set POCs just underneath 400s where we've pulled back into the range yesterday. Now, of course, yesterday's POC level was actually established around about 12.3s. And you can actually see as well, if you look at it, we are actually sitting at that 12,300 level pretty cleanly as things stand. So obviously a break of 12.3s really does allow for a deeper sell-off in NAS. And then you're looking at a probable potential return back into 12.1s, which does allow for a potential 200-point decline. But as we speak, NASDAQ sellers are again weaving into the markets. Dow Jones is tepid. Tried to recover there a few minutes ago, but we're kind of still sitting in that range. And of course, as I said, with S&Ps flowing back in. So keep an eye on those three levels. Yesterday's point of control value levels should become interesting for the course of the day, because that'll give us an anchor point as to whether this sell-off is probably going to be sustained or whether it's more kind of like a retest of yesterday's lows, the value area where there was a lot of volume, and where we're actually going to get another potential pump higher. So keep an eye on that scenario as well through the course of the day. Now as well, but gold, quickly back to gold as well. Gold still holding fairly well on the lower time frames. Now it's becoming a little bit wicky in the last, I suppose, hour or so, very back and forth. Of course, if dollar strength was to persevere and continue through the course of the afternoon, don't be surprised to see a little bit of profit taking in gold and maybe come back down. You have a little bit of an area here at 1890s, but you also have an area here as well at 1910s. Should we see a bit of gold selling coming through, those would be very, very logical levels to keep an eye out on from a price action perspective. Pure price action alone, buyers v sellers, keep an eye on that broadly speaking. So risk off, still continuing obviously into the Lagarde conference. Dollars, DXY is becoming a little bit more wicky and volatile. But of course, as I said, if you are trading indices, those levels from yesterday should become very, very important. Now, in fact, if I look at physical price action, the 48.50 handle is obviously of interest. If I look at the Dow Jones, this area here around 31,500s, 450s at the end of the selling yesterday should become important to determine whether that actually holds up or whether that breaks, because we've talked about 31,500 all week, kind of holding on, and haven't really seen a clean break through that yet. So if we are to take out these lows, then you're really allowing for those deepening sell-offs that we talked about on Tuesday back into 31,000 and potentially even lower than that if that selling is to become a little bit more perseverant through the course of the afternoon as well. All right, so that's pretty much where we are, everyone, for the afternoon. Obviously Lagarde at 145, worth keeping an eye on the sentiment, particularly the rhetoric, to determine whether the aggressive cycle approach is going to continue over the next few months. And of course, if that is to be the case, then you could see that shift in sentiment as well. So obviously just been watching that very, very closely as well. All right. With everyone, also everyone trade safe, have utilized good risk management. Make sure you're not overexposure, because of course Thursdays tends to be one of the busier trading days of the week anyway, if not the busiest. So you tend to do get some fairly significant percentage swings anyway. 1-2% swings, 300-500 points in some of these indices like the Dow Jones and the DAX can never be ruled out as well. So just trade safe, utilize good risk management, and we'll see you all again tomorrow, where the lads will be back again for another market open.